Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodlenits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the Pattern Design Circle podcast. I'm so excited to be here in your ear again for another episode. And today I have a special guest with me. I have Beth, who is a team member on Knit Stars. So that's where you've maybe seen her, or maybe you know that she is the business owner behind Adaptive Knitter and doing lots of fun, exciting things there. What else would you like to share about yourself, Beth?
Wow, that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, if you are a Knit Stars owner or if you're a subscriber to our Yarniverse, you've seen this space quite a bit. I host the Zoom sessions quite often and have interviewed lots of people on our platform. So it's kind of fun to be on this side of the camera for once and let you come up with all the questions.
Yes. I feel like we could probably have a whole nother episode all about your experience, like all the people you've met with and like all the things
I
you've
am
there too.
so fortunate to be in my position. I mean, I love what I do. I'm the relationships lead for Knit Stars, which means that I get to talk with the biggest and the brightest minds in our industry, like on the daily. And I get to, coordinate with them. And I talk to some great new dyers like today, people I've never heard of before. And I'm getting to see all these cool, fresh projects and products that they're working on. And I kind of play matchmaker sometimes. That's really fun, like hooking up a designer with a dyer and getting them to work together on the same level. It's really, I love my job. I could not be happier in the position that I'm in. It's a really fun place to be, and I get to meet just incredible people like you all the time. That's great.
Yes, that's so wonderful. So Knit Stars is amazing.
Yes, it
But
is.
you also have this other thing that you've been
Yeah.
creating. Why? Why?
Adaptive Knitter is my passion project. It is the thing that is mine and mine alone, and that I'm ready and excited to share out with the rest of the world. I call myself the adaptive knitter because I was born with a small arm. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see
Yes.
my hand right there. If you're not watching on YouTube, did you know that she posts all these videos to YouTube? Go over there and check it out. Um,
Beth
anyhow,
just learned that. So
I just learned that. I've been listening on my phone for all this time. I didn't realize. Anyhow, go over to YouTube and then you can see what I'm talking about. I was born with a disability. It's called AMC, or arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. Right? Yeah.
We'll definitely remember that one.
No, AMC, like the movie theater, right?
Yeah.
That people usually can remember. I call it my lucky fin. It's a small arm. It's kind of curved. Lucky fin is like a nod to Finding Nemo. He had a little tiny fin too. So that's what people with limb differences often call their arm. But because I have this disability that I was born with, it's congenital, right? I was born with it. I've had to adapt not just the way I live, but the way I craft and how I make things with string. and how I hold the needles or the hook or whatever I'm doing, I have to adapt and change the way that I do things, thus adaptive knitter. And my passion is helping those people who want to learn, or specifically those who want to relearn how to knit or crochet, how to do it comfortably in a way that works for them, and to get back to doing what they love. I mean, can you imagine being a human who's a knitter? I think all of you listening are nodding your heads. Yes, I can imagine that. And then losing that ability because of an accident, because of stroke, because of an illness, because you sprained your finger or you got carpal tunnel, right? Something happened and it changed your body in some way. And you're now faced with not being able to do that thing that brings you calm, that brings you center, that brings you joy in your daily life. I'm here to help you. And I want to help you get back to doing what you love, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes a day. If that's what you can do, you're still doing. My motto is done is the destination, right? It doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to look like it used to look. Mm-hmm. What you're creating is still creating. And I can help you figure out how to hold that needle in a certain way. I use this giant needle as an example, right? Most people hold it in like a pencil or over the top. They have certain ways, right? With my hand, I can't do that. So I lever it on my arm, but it still holds the needle in the right position for me to create the loops. So, I mean, I think that's the long answer for why adaptive knitter is.
And I know some of our past conversations, just us talking, you've also talked how just valuable as a human it is to be able to adapt. Like
absolutely,
how adaptability applies to our lives in so many ways, regardless of how we're experiencing the world.
It transcends the craftiness of it all, right? I'm working on creating a new course right now for teaching, and I call it Maker's Mindset. Maker's Mindset, adaptive thinking for makers, and how to take that pattern that you're given, that you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This is not going to work for me. How to think through, well, what does work for me? And how can I take this pattern and turn it into a recipe instead of a pattern and make it work for me? Or, I mean, it goes past crafting into how can I take this garment that I love, that I've purchased at a store, and how can I make this work for me? Nothing fits me in my body the way or off a rack. It never has, it never will. I've come to understand that. But a maker's mindset makes you deconstruct it in your mind and really be able to pivot and find a way to make things work for who you are. And I mean, I think that's all.
And it's like, it feels like it's just not just in a way to minimize what it is, but it's another form of problem solving. Like
absolutely
thinking through, there's this obstacle, and how am I going to overcome that thing and make it work?
On the very front page of my website, it says, I believe adaptation is its own form of creativity. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that is like that's the crux of what I do. Adaptation is taking a problem, figuring out the pieces, parts of each one of them, and then finding the creative solution that works for you. My solution is not going to be the same as your solution. My body is not the same as your body. My brain is not the same as your brain. This transcends physical barriers into emotional and mental barriers that we all have as well. So adaptation is its own form of creativity. And as makers, that language speaks to us.
Yes. And I feel like it applies so well as business owners as well. Like
that's a really good point.
Taking something that maybe doesn't feel like it's 100% in alignment. Like it's like, I like bits and pieces of this, but it just does not work for me. How am I
Absolutely.
going to change that so that it does work? So I do enjoy it, so that it does feel aligned and I'm creating something that I'm really joyful about. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's.
It sure doesn't. I think that's really visible in maybe the last couple of years as you look at the different platforms that we're all on. We all have a website of some sort. They don't all look the same. They used to. Right. They all look a little bit different. And that's because we have different needs. We have different audiences. One size does not fit all. I don't want my website to look like the car dealership's website. I just don't. Want somebody to see mine and feel a sense of calm, a sense of relief, a sense of home. Where a car dealership wants you to get in, buy a car, and then get out again, right? So there's different needs. And that also goes through our Instagram accounts. A lot of people have a very aesthetic grid, and I can really appreciate that. I am not that person. I'm messy. So my Instagram grid does not look like everybody else's. And I think that with Instagram and TikTok and all of these other platforms that are so in our hands and in our minds and in our brains 24/7, I think that those differences standing out really kind of help personalize our brands. And
Yeah.
that goes straight to the business aspect of things, right? I'm messy, but you're going to have fun. You're going to get information, and you're going to enjoy your time there. And that's just me. So I think that's an important part of how we present ourselves in business.
Well,
Authenticity.
yes, I think I mean, I definitely feel like we have seen it with the prominence of TikTok and Reels that there is so much craving and creation of things that aren't perfect. Like it's a lot of showing up, doing silly things, sharing vulnerable stories, showing up in the messiness of life, and it's not picture perfect. Like we are seeing less and less of those grids that are like perfectly curated. And I agree, they're absolutely beautiful. The people that I really resonate with are the people who are real, that are really showing the
Yeah.
messiness of life. And I think we're in a really beautiful place as creators. There's a lot of things that are hard where we're at in this day and age, but it's also a really beautiful space where there is a lot of space to show up authentically and vulnerably and be different, and people are actually recognizing the value in being different.
I totally agree. And I feel like it really helps um, humanize the person behind the brand when you can relate on a visceral level, like, oh, yeah, I definitely did only do laundry once last week. Yes, I can relate to that. I get it. But I can still show up professionally, and I can still be, I, there are certain things that when you relate on a human level, then you're open to learn more about what that message is that's behind the silliness, that's behind the entertainment. Entertainment and learning don't have to be separated. They really don't. In fact, I think by combining them, you get a more retention. You get more interest in maybe doing some further deep dive research on your consumer's part, and maybe going to that website that you've spent so much time on, right? By saying, oh, that's a person I want to get to know. Let me go look further into their background, and then bring them on board, get them onto your brand, get them onto your mailing list.
Yes. I think, just specifically what you're talking about learning, if you think back to when you were in school and the teachers that resonated with you, I think especially hearing different people's experiences with uh, the subject history, and how much difference their teacher made in their perception of history and what they remember from history, and like the teachers who made it really fun and engaging, you enjoy it a lot more. And so we change and evolve as humans, but there's a lot of things that don't change about us. We like to be entertained. We like to have fun as we're doing things that maybe otherwise would seem boring and
Yeah, I
exciting.
so agree. And that's one of the reasons that I mean, what is history but stories, right? History
Mhm.
is
Yes.
storytelling.
Yes.
That's what history is. And that's one of the reasons when I do my talks or when I go around the country and I talk or teach, I always incorporate a couple really, really specific stories from my past, from my history, related to my disability or to my hurdles that I've come across in my life. Um, and I get really specific. You're not going to have the same story that I have, but by listening to a full story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, you can take yourself and go there and then think back to your past almost subconsciously about, oh, I didn't have that problem, but I had another issue that was like that. And boy, if somebody had told me that I could have just done this one thing, I could have gotten through it, right? So I think that that's a really important part of well, of teaching, of talking, of engaging, of communicating. I'm a relationships manager. That's what I do. I manage relationships, and by doing that, I have come to understand how alike we really all are across all races, socioeconomic backgrounds, physical and mental, and all the different kinds of otherness that there is. At the base level, we are so alike and we can relate to one another through our humanity. And I think that's a really important part of my brand as adaptive knitter and
Mhm.
how I can relate to anybody who takes my class or comes to one of my talks. Um, this year is my year of like getting out there. I want everybody to hear my name and say, "Oh, adaptive knitter. Okay, I know what she does." Right? But by doing that, um, I can get put in a niche. When though just the name adaptive knitter makes someone think, well, I don't consider myself neurospicy, or I don't consider myself to have a disability or a physical um, hurdle that I need to get through. I don't need Beth. I don't need her. But what I want to say to everybody really is that everybody's going to need me at some point in their life, right? Have you ever been chopping a onion and slice your finger and now you're in a big old bandage, right? Well, so for 2 weeks, guess what? You can't use your pointer finger, which is pretty darn important for knitters, right? I can teach you how to knit without your pointer finger. And I can teach you how to think about that ahead of time before that happens. So that when that happens, or you sprain your finger, or you hurt your arm, your shoulder, or the list goes on. I can teach you how to think about those parts of your body that are engaged with your craft now, and what kind of strategies we can employ if something happened in your body. Now, I am not advocating people go out if they have a dislocated shoulder and start knitting right away, right? I don't want you to hurt yourself further to re-injure yourself or hurt in order to have your craft. But I think that after a certain amount of rest and once you've you're on the mend, there are ways to get back to doing what you love, even if it's just for a short period of time each day. So to feed your soul, to get back to that normal, that thing that really helps a lot of people get through the day. That for me, knitting is that my alone time. It's a time I'm introspective and it's almost a meditation for me, right? I sit down, I knit, I don't have an audiobook playing, I don't have TV, not always, but at least for a couple minutes a day, I do this. And I really just think about what's going on today. What do I have on my schedule? What do I have planned? How am I feeling? How's my body feeling? Oh, my back hurts. Okay, well, I got to think about that, right? So, and really taking stock of what's going on. Um, And if I don't have that every day, I don't feel well by 1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So I need that. And I know other people do too.
Yes, yes. Let's take a couple steps back. We were
Okay.
talking about social media and people being different, and I think that's a beautiful thing of the internet is that we folks who feel different now they see other people that look like them.
Yeah.
So we want to talk a bit on this episode about ableism and specifically ableism in the fiber industry.
Yeah.
So can you start us off on like the ground foundation?
What is
What,
ableism?
what is ableism?
Absolutely. Ableism is like any ism. Let me see here. It's a discrimination against people with disabilities. But let's just get a little clearer on that, right? It is the idea and the thinking that able-bodied folks are superior and that their bodies are superior, and that disabled folks, that their bodies are inferior, that they're less able. Disabled does not mean less able, but that is the thinking, right? That they're disabled, they're less able than people with able-bodied, who are able-bodied. That's just the crux of what is ableism, and it is the discrimination against those folks.
Yeah, and then
Right.
the assumptions that come from that of, well, if this
Yeah.
person has this disability, then they won't be able to do this. And we, as a society, tend to treat those people differently. We make these assumptions of
Right. And it's,
they
oh, I'm
can or
sorry.
can't do this, and then we
Exactly.
try to compensate for them and things. It's like,
Or not compensate.
or not compensate.
That's one of the things
Yes.
about being ableist is, it manifests in so many different ways. One of them being that we don't put in ramps in new builds, that we, the physical barriers, that's what marginalizes this group of people.
Mhm.
Stairs, getting into a building, stairs to get into a building, that is the marginalizing of a person who uses a wheelchair for mobility or a cane,
Mhm.
right? Or someone with arthritis in their knee and they can't do stairs more than one or two at a time, that. But the idea that, yeah, those folks are out there, but they're such a small little group that we don't really have to worry about them until they show up. Right. So those barriers marginalize. Practices and policies marginalize. It's kind of crazy to think that until 1997 or 8, I mean, there was not a law on the books to say that places had to make accommodations, right? My daughter was born in 1999. So, I mean, that just puts things into perspective for me. I was in college when that happened. And I remember friends of mine saying, oh, what? This isn't already happening? It's crazy. Societal attitudes promote ableism.
And
Just
then
the
because it
idea.
is such a societal thing, it kind of becomes ingrained in us in ways that we don't even recognize
Yes.
or realize until somebody does bring it to our attention.
Yeah. And that's called internalized ableism, right? And that's just something that because of the way that our society is built around us, we have internalized that these ableist views subconsciously. These are not things that we're doing on purpose to say, we think we are better than them. That is not the case. But because we don't see a ramp I'm using the ramp because it's just so visual,
Yes.
right? There's so many more things, but the ramp is just a visual representation of this physical barrier, right? We don't see it. We don't expect it. we don't think, if you think about your home, I have 3 steps that lead up to my front door. When my mother-in-law comes, we need 2 people, one on each side, to help her up into my home.
Mm-hmm.
My home, a disabled woman's home, is not accessible to people in my family. I didn't think about that when I bought this house. It didn't even cross my mind because everyone in my home can get into my home. But if I can't have my mother-in-law come over, I mean, that's an issue,
Yeah.
right? Right. So that's an internalized ableist view that is a subconscious thing that you don't realize you're even doing, but you're doing. And those can be really dangerous when those kinds of feelings are happening to people who are disabled, right? So I'm disabled and I have internalized ableist thoughts all the time, and I have to call myself out on them quite often.
Mm-hmm. And I think historically, we've been even less aware of these things because when somebody knows that they aren't going to be able to use or access this place or this thing,
Yeah.
like they're not going to show up and like they can't do it. So
Right.
you're just not as aware because they know that
And
it's
as a business owner, you're losing some business when that happens. Yeah. So if you're 40% of the population in the United States has a disability of some form. They're not all physical, right? But if a person comes and let's say they're autistic, okay, and they come to your business and the lights are really, really, really bright and the music is really, really, really loud and you're shopping and there's so much stuff and nothing's organized and it's kind of, aesthetically cool looking, right? But not organized in a sensible way or in a that was really poor wording on my part, but you get the idea. If I'm that person coming to the door, I may open the door and shut it and walk away, and that is a sale that you might not get because you have not thought through how can I make my business more accessible? How can I adapt my model to be welcoming to all people? And that goes into the crafting industry as well. So think about patterns and pattern writing. Many patterns have a chart, but not all. And there's not really a standard format for pattern writers to follow. Everybody kind of has their own thing. They templatize their pattern and then they recreate because it's easy, drag, drop, and on you go, right? But things like not having a bold black text on a white background, having script maybe instead of like an Arial font or something that's very clear and easy to read, even down to the charts themselves. If they're too small or they're not clear, that can be an issue for someone with low vision or with dyslexia or visually impaired in some other way. That can be a real issue. There are tools that people can use to help with that. But as a designer, and I know you are, and many of the people listening are, this is something, it's a time to start thinking about and dissecting, well, what am I putting out there? Is this available to my biggest population, to everybody in it? I just found out that Tin Can Knits created an app for their site, for their patterns. I'm not telling everybody to create an app. I know what a pain point that is. It's not a simple thing, not a simple task. However, I like to raise up people who I think are doing a really great job at something, and I think they are. If you haven't downloaded their app yet, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not. I just really admire what they've done. There's some free patterns in there too, so I mean that's like a bonus, right? But what they have done is really made it a clear way to read a pattern. So with all of the sizes, let's say you're doing a sweater and there's 7 or 8 sizes, you can say, well, I want to do this size, and everything else disappears. So you don't have that long strand of 12 numbers telling you how many to cast on, and you have to pick the right one. It tells you, oh, you're a size XL. Okay, this is follow these directions. And if you're on a reader app that's a text reader, if that's reading that text to you, you don't have to count 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the number, right? It'll just tell you the number to cast on. It just makes things really simplified. And I think kudos to them for moving in that direction. I think it's a really great idea.
Have you heard of Ribbler?
No.
RIBBLR. So for folks who are designers who don't have the ability to create their own app, it is a website that is it's all about that, where it requires a lot more work from the designers on the back end, because you can't just upload your PDF.
Yeah.
But it is specifically made so that you can select your size, and it has you can have charted instructions and written instructions, but you're just reading the actual size on there. So
yay, Ribbler. Yay, that's fantastic.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna have to go check that out after this. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so there are resources that can help us. And then also earlier on the podcast, I had Renee Van Hoy, who talked about accessibility. So if you're listening and you haven't listened to that episode, and you're looking for more very specific kind of things you can do as a designer, that episode will help as well.
Renee, I didn't know you had her on. I missed that one. Yay, I'm going to go listen to Renee.
I don't, at the time that we're recording, oh yeah, it did come out. It came out in February. But yes, it will have been several months ago now. But yeah, anyway,
Well, if we're talking about business, I can talk about a couple other things that you can think about. Like if you have a physical shop, things to think. I mentioned the lights and I mentioned the sounds, right? But there are other things. I mean, local yarn stores are kind of notorious for having as much packed in as possible, because they're just not, possible to have all of their stock out in usually a very small space. But one thing to think about is the width of your aisles, and that maybe having 2 or 4 skeins out of something with more in the back or in storage, so that you can have the wider aisles and it's a little bit easier to manage and negotiate your way through. That's a great step in the right direction. Making sure it's well lit, but not like strobe lighty. That's a great idea. Giving people additional shopping times. A lot of people don't want to be approached right away, so you can introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm here, let me know if you want, and let them browse a little bit, let them look around, but be keyed into when they're picking something up and kind of looking left or right, going, oh, maybe now's the time to get over there, and to make sure that your place is a welcoming area for all people of all sizes, shapes, and abilities. Just making a conscious effort to think about that as people enter your business. Everyone who comes into a yarn store is there for a reason. They want to look at really great yarn and feel it and touch it. And just because you might not think that they are the typical knitter doesn't mean that they're not, or they're a maker of some kind. So keeping your internalized ableism kind of in check when people walk through that door, and just seeing a customer who might be excited about a new place that they found is a great, just kind of initial first step to welcoming someone into your place of business.
Yes, yes. And then all of the things online as well. I think it woke up for the fiber industry specifically, woke us up a bit when everything kind of went down with Ravelry. And so many people couldn't use it and still can't use it. Um, and a lot of that is contrast and the actual colors you're using and
Absolutely.
uh, just making it so that it's
And that's an online presence, right? I mean, your shop, whether it's physical or it's digital, has an effect on who comes and visits
mm,
that shop. And Ravelry, while a huge resource for many, many, many different things, is at its base a shop. It's a place to come and look for and purchase patterns, etc. So if you're walking in virtually to this place and it doesn't feel comfortable and it hurts your body, then that is not a place that everybody can be. It's
mhm.
exclusionary.
Yes. When you were talking about charts, another thing that came to mind was the colors that you use in your charts.
Yes.
And sometimes that is, does the color show up well in general? But also when somebody prints it, does that show up?
Yes.
Um,
Right.
and then colors on your website, the backgrounds of things, and just whether
One of
they,
the things I've seen more recently in patterns that I really appreciate is having the aesthetic at those first two pages, front and back, where that is like, ooh, look at the pretty colors, and you can see the model. You can really see all of the branding and everything that makes it that designer's pattern is on pages 1 and 2, and then pages 3 through 7 or whatever it is are pretty standard, just white page, black text, dark black, not silver, right? With a good sized font, and that just doing that ups the accessibility factor,
Mhm.
right? People don't have to print those first 2 pages, and you still have all your branding, and you still have the thing that connects it to you and your brand and your creativity, but the rest of it is all about getting that thing made. Right.
Mhm. And to me, as a maker, it's also like that's just practical. Like then people don't have to print out a whole bunch of stuff that's not necessary and like just adding more fluff. Like
Yeah.
let's just use what we need.
Right. And we have the option to add more visuals online.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that I've been seeing people do, and I really appreciate. They say here are 3 or 5 pictures. To see more, check out my Ravelry page or my website where it's got 35 pictures plus some more from makers from all over the world, right? And that's the great way to connect it to the person who's got it in their hand. It doesn't have to be in the pattern as
Mhm.
long as it's available. And I mean, think about other ways that you can make it more accessible. Do a stitch tutorial on your YouTube channel for the one thing you're going to get customer service questions about.
Yes.
Right? And then talk it through while you're doing it. So I've seen lots of video tutorials that are great visually. You can see it's really clear, it's really big, hands are full in view. But if somebody was just listening and they had low vision, they could not understand what was going on. So by saying, and now we yarn over, and now we slip to or whatever you're doing, that's another step towards inclusivity.
Yes. And then for people who can't hear, captions.
Captions.
And if it's something of showing your face, if you're holding up something, don't talk while you have that thing held up in front of your face because then they can't read your lips.
Yeah,
Uh, Simple things like that, where, if you're just mindful of it, it's not that big of a
mindful. That's
deal.
a great word to apply to this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mindfulness, and it's also going back and apologizing when you say something wrong, but fixing. Apologies are fine. They're great and they're necessary, but taking that next step to correct is where you're going to gain more traction, I think. And really that's what goes from, yes, I said something ableist, I'm sorry, to, yes, I said something ableist, I'm really sorry about that. And now I'm going to do better. And that practice of doing better, of taking that next step is what's going to help you not do it again the next time, or 4 times or 5 times from now, right? And it's a process. I'm fully aware.
Yes. And I think having the mindset of knowing that we're always going to continue learning and growing as humans, so that when somebody does point out, hey, this was very ableist, this wasn't something you should have said, rather than beating ourselves up over it and, getting defensive or whatever, be like, oh, hey, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. That was a failure on my part. But now I can learn from that and I can do
Yes.
better. I can treat people better. I can exist as a more kind, compassionate, mindful human as I continue to navigate through the world. That's a quote that I keep seeing and over recently is that we learn from our failures and not from our successes. And I feel like our society, we're so ingrained into us that like we can't fail or it's a bad thing to fail. Um, but we wouldn't learn things like this if we didn't fail. If somebody hadn't made the mistake, if somebody hadn't then said, hey, this isn't okay, this doesn't work, say Ravelry, if the people who couldn't use it just suddenly ghosted and
Yeah.
like nobody would have learned from that experience.
Yeah. That's what adaptation is.
Yeah.
It's failing over and over and over and then over again until you get it right for you.
Mm,
You're not going to get it right the first time. If you have two able hands and suddenly you only have one able hand, it's going to take some trial and error. It's going to take failing 15 times before you figure out, oh, something clicks. And that one little thing that you moved, one little thing that you changed, a different kind of needle that you used, a different kind of fiber that you used, or even changing out your needle for a hook. I'm trying to grab one, I couldn't do it fast enough, right? Maybe changing from a needle to a hook is what has to happen for you to continue to be a maker using fiber. That might be true, right? But until you try and you fail a number of times, you don't know what that answer is. And that's okay.
and give
And
yourself
that's okay.
grace. Like the
Yeah,
things that we, say we learned at a very young age, and now we just do without thinking about it. A lot of those things took a lot of trial and error.
yeah,
Walking, if you're able to walk, eating, feeding yourself, like so many things that we just do now feel instinctual, but it was a
yeah,
whole learning process of
absolutely.
trying and failing over and over and over and over and over again. And at that point, maybe we didn't have the same associations with failure. It might have been frustrating, but now we've adopted some of these beliefs around failure that then now we can unshed, we can shed,
Yeah,
and we can like, all right, this is part of the learning process. This is part of the growing process. This is part of learning something new and adapting
yeah.
and doing it differently.
One of the things that I teach is that what I say at the outset of every class is, if you can tie your shoes, you can learn to knit.
Mhm.
And I firmly believe that. We don't all tie our shoes the same way. We don't, some hold it two-fisted and give it a tug, some hold it with fingertips. Some wrap it around their finger. I've seen so many different ways that people tie their shoes. And when you actually think about it and watch people do it, you're like, there's more than you even thought out there.
Yes.
But all knitting is tension, loops, and string, right? And making those three things come together in a certain way. That's what tying your shoe is. And how long did it take you to learn how to tie your shoes? For most kids, it took 6 months to a year. Like, it takes a long time to learn to tie your shoes. And so give yourself a little, right? It's okay. It might take you a while to learn to knit or learn to relearn to knit, but that's okay. I can help you because we're going to figure out how to make that tension. How are you going to pull tight enough to make the loop that you need to make? How are you going to, what kind of mobility do you have to pull it around and tuck it under? And do you have fine motor or is it big motor? How do you put that loop underneath? There are lots of different ways to do it. Done is the destination. It doesn't have to look like I do it. It doesn't have to look like you do it. In the end, we just want a fabric that we can wear and be proud of.
And I think it might be helpful. It depends where you're at, what your headspace, but sometimes it can be helpful to find other people that are proving that it's possible. Like it's like,
Yes.
all right, well, I know Beth is able to do this because of her situation. So I know it's possible. I just have to uh, learn the skills. I just have to be patient with
Find my way.
and
Yeah.
yes. But surrounding yourself with people that prove that it's possible instead of people that are maybe sharing without even knowing it necessarily a message that it's not possible.
Yeah. I think as crafters, it's very easy to fall into that pitfall of saying, this is how things are done. Right. I'm going to go outside of knitting and I'm not picking on embroidery. I'm not, but if you're making, and if you're an embroiderist, I never actually tried to say that as if you are embroidering and it's easy to say to somebody, oh, that's not the way it's done. This is how it's done. You want to do this first, then that, and then loop it around and then go back in. And now you've got the curly Q. Okay. But the curly Q is what you're looking for. That's the part that we're trying to achieve here. It doesn't have to be always the same way. This is how you purl. You're purling wrong. Well, does it make the bump and not the V? Because if it does, you're purling. Right? Yes, don't make big movements. It's not efficient. Well, it's not efficient for you. For me, it's really efficient because when I throw and I pull it around, I'm exercising my shoulder and my elbow and my wrist. I'm getting a workout and doing my PT at the same time as I'm knitting. So for me, it is very efficient. I'm doing two things at once. For you, it's not. It's easy as crafters to say, this is how things are done. You're doing it wrong. What we need to do is shift and say, this is how I do things. How do you do things? And as long as the done is the destination, as long as the effect is there, then you're doing it properly for your body.
And I think that extends to basically everything that we do as humans. It's so easy. I don't know if it's just the way that our culture is or the way that humans are or whatever it is, but we're so used to hearing people say things from their point of view as if that's the fact and the reality for everyone. We see this in the business marketing realm over and over again of this is the way you do it. This is the way that you are successful. And it's like, well, actually, there's a million different ways you can go about it and they all work. And like, I know when I'm around people, like other designers and stuff, and I'm knitting and they're like, what? You knit weird. Like, what are you doing? And but if you look at my finished project, you would it looks the same as anybody else who's doing knits and pearls. So
you knit like Jessica. That's who you knit like.
yes, and it's all like adaptations that I had created to feel comfortable because I didn't like the way that like the yarn usually is like tensioned on the hand and like
I don't do that either.
Weird. And so like I just found a way that I was more comfortable with. It does mean that I'm a very loose knitter, but it works and I adjust as I need to, and that's the way it is.
That's a fantastic example of how to adapt for your own body, and that disabled bodies aren't the only ones that need adaptations. Every body is different. Not everybody and everybody are different,
Yes.
and that we all have different needs, and meeting those needs is important.
Yeah.
And for long-term health and for long-term comfort, it's important to listen to your body and to understand your body and what it's doing. You made those adaptations because something you were doing felt uncomfortable. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel relaxing, right? So you said, well, if I don't, maybe not consciously, put my finger up so high and I hold it down low, more like a Norwegian knitting instead of English knitting, then I'm more comfortable in the end. And you're going to have a more pleasant experience doing what you love. And that is okay. That's more than okay. It's fantastic.
Yes.
That's a great example that everybody adapts.
Yes. And your point again that the goal is done. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the way that you get there isn't nearly, I mean, it's important because the journey is valuable and you enjoy the experience,
Absolutely.
but um it doesn't change.
I knit for two totally separate reasons. I enjoy the process. I like the sound. I like the feel. I like the warmth in my lap and the comfy chair and the excuse not to go for a walk. But I also knit because I really want to wear the dang thing. Get that sweater off the needle so I can wear it to Rhinebeck. I want to wear it. So for two things can be true at the same time.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Oh, I love this so much. Is there anything else that you feel like we should point out from ableism within the fiber industry specifically?
The only other thing I would say is to really think about ableism as you're creating your social media posts. That is the thing that people see literally every day for some of us, from us, and that being accommodating in the way that we post, in the way that we respond, in the way that we use our words, uh, and the way that we present our materials and our assets and our graphics are all important. It's important to think about them before they go out, where your text is, whether or not you have captions enabled if you're doing a video, um, alt text for photos and pictures and videos that you have included in your posts. With AI, things are so much easier. There's almost no excuse other than the fact that you're not forward thinking, that
Yeah.
you don't do these things when you post. Showing the consumers of your like Instagram, right, that you are not that you're inclusive in your content is going to help your business grow, and it's going to show that compassion and that understanding that the world is not all made up of Beths, right? Or made up of Jessicas. There's not a million Jessicas in the world. There's only the one, and everybody else is a little bit different. So there's sharing that part of yourself to everyone, as is a great first step to making your brand and your business and your company more accessible to everybody so everyone can enjoy what you do.
Yes, you mentioned AI. Do you know of any programs that like will create the alt text for you or things like that to
I will send you, I have a couple. They're really basic at this point. However, I have a trick. What I do is you could drop a picture in and it just says woman in purple top with red glasses
Mhm.
sitting in a room with a plant, right? Or something like that. That's what it'll say, right? But then you can throw that into like Chat GPT and just type maybe 12 more words about things in the room. There are also these 12 things in the room, and then say, create an alt text paragraph from this, and
Mhm.
it will in 2.2 seconds. And really, all you got to do is list the
Mhm.
chair and the model with the gradient yarn and and it'll just do it. It really takes you less than 10 seconds from the time you drop your picture in putting it in something like ChatGPT. I know there are other options, and you're ready to go.
Yes, yes. For those who are listening and don't see the video, what Beth was describing is
my background
situation. What's the video on her side? Well, so I know at the time that this is coming out, you have your partner Knit Stars, so there's a new Knit Stars coming out.
Season 9 will be its main launch right after this is released. So if you don't know what Knit Stars is, now's a great time to go check out Knit Stars, but maybe go to my Instagram first and click on my link in bio, which will have a link over there. And season 9 will be having its main launch right at that point. However, I also have a masterclass. I was a knit star in season 8, and I taught adaptive knitting. Surprise! So if you're interested in seeing that masterclass at the same time as season 9 is coming out, you can also pick up season 8. It'll go right into your thing. You can watch it like right away, even if you have to wait a couple weeks for season 9 to debut. I think there's going to be a little bit of time between when this releases and when that comes out, but you can still get in there and either get on the waiting list or get purchased right away. And season 8 you can get right away, and I will have a link for that in my bio, and I'll share it with Jessica as well so she can put it in the notes.
Yes, and we'll have your adaptive knitter link in the notes as well.
Yeah, my website, my Instagram, all the places.
Yes. So if folks want to follow you and see your stuff, Adaptive Knitter is...
I'm Adaptive Knitter everywhere. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I'm on the interwebs, adaptiveknitter.com. Those are my three main platforms for Adaptive Knitter. And look for me out and about. This year is all about me trying to get my message out there to the world. I'm going to be teaching in a whole bunch of different places. And if you are interested in having me teach in your LYS, at your knitting guild, at a fiber event or show that you attend, reach out. I'd love to talk with you about it and get something set up.
Yay.
I also do one-on-ones for anybody who maybe can't get out of their home or doesn't want to travel to a big yarn show to have an adaptive knitter course. I do one-on-one adaptive knitting sessions where I really tailor the entire process to you and what you've got going on, and we work through and get you knitting.
Perfect. This has been so fun to chat with you. Thank you so much.
This is great. Thanks for having me on. I just love what you've done with this platform. It's so fun and really covers such a wide range of topics. I think any business owner in the crafting field industry should be listening to you and subscribing to your design circle.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to have you.
Bye.
Wow, thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.